Welcome to the Loved Called Gifted podcast. This is your place to come for musings about spirituality, identity and purpose. I'm your host, Catherine Cowell. So I am absolutely delighted to be joined this morning by Carol Barwick. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Catherine.
So would you like to just introduce yourself, tell us where you are in the world and what you get up to?
Yeah, I'm Carol Barwick. I live just on the border of Leeds and Wakefield, but I'm originally from London. And I live in Leeds with my husband and my 13-year-old son as of a few days ago, and my cat. And what I get up to is I also podcast, which is why I've built this lovely link with you, Catherine. And I have a business/ministry called Raise, and that's all about raising confidence and inspiring creativity.
Fantastic. This is actually one half of a two-part conversation. So half of it is going to be on my Loved Called Gifted podcast, and then half of it is going to be on your Raise podcast. So once you've listened to this half of the conversation, which will all be about Carol and her story, then the next bit will be coming out the day after we release this. So this will come out on a Friday and the next bit will come out on the Saturday. So you can pop across to Carol's podcast and listen to that bit, and all the links will be in the show notes. We're going to be discussing a word on your podcast, aren't we?
Yeah. So what God's kind of showed me is, I've always loved words. I am, as they say, a word nerd. And I've loved words from an early age. And I think that's come through my parents, and my uncle particularly really loved words. And what I realised was that one word could really shape a particular time in my life. And so particularly over COVID, I found that just having one word a week helped me to kind of shape that week in a different way. And so I formed a community, a Facebook community, out of people that I'd actually worked with physically over the years before. And we started looking at just one word each week. And then I'd already been thinking a bit about doing a podcast. And so I thought we'll explore that word a bit further. And so I did that for a number of years with guests. Generally, I do that just by myself now because it's a bit easier to manage, but I'm really excited about having you as a guest. And I think the word that we're going to look at is doubt, which is always a really interesting word. And I'm really excited about doing this kind of tandem idea. I've not done that before.
Yes, so you always have a raised word, which I think is a brilliant idea. And I think we won't talk about this now because we'll talk about it on your podcast, but I think the link between this conversation and the word doubt will be clear. But I'm really excited about that because I think doubt is a brilliant word, and that it opens the door to huge amounts of growth and new adventures. So that's just to whet your appetite. So anyway, let us dive into your story a bit. So you talked about your ministry as being about raising confidence and inspiring creativity. And I know that you're a really creative type. If we kind of go back, where did your creativity begin to emerge in your life?
So all throughout my life, my mum had serious depression. I think we're wondering now whether possibly it was schizophrenia, or I'm not sure. Now we know so much more about things. But basically, she always struggled with life. So I think creativity became an outlet for me from quite an early age. And one of the things that happened, which was a real milestone, was a neighbour across from me came to our house one evening and he bought, it's called a minute book. It's like a big ledger kind of book. And it was just full of lined pages, but obviously completely empty. And he said, I wondered if Carol might like to use this. I still have that book now. And that book just got full of pictures and poems. And I think from quite an early age, I realised that songs were really just poems with some music attached to them. So I wrote a few little kind of worship songs in there. And we're talking about, this was age 7. I got the book. And so probably by the age 8 or 9, I'd written some songs. And I just found that creativity was a way of escape, really. And my mum was an incredible person, and she used to sing, and she journaled and wrote poems and things like that a lot as well. And so does my dad. So I think I had a real creative basis, but it became personal to me at a really early age. And that's never changed. I mean, I remember being bullied at school and sitting in the toilets at school and writing a story about being bullied. That's what I did to escape from it. So creative writing has been absolutely an outlet in so many different ways.
Yeah. I love to know where people discover kind of their life purpose. It could have gone all sorts of ways, couldn't it? Being handed a book. It's really interesting, isn't it? How there can be these little moments when something emerges in your life. But I imagine there are quite a lot of kids for whom that would have been of absolutely no interest whatsoever.
Mm.
So what is it like for you when you are in the midst of some creativity? What is going on for you?
Wow. It's different. It's different for the different things that I create. Poems are very quick. It's really hard to describe, but almost like a bit of a rush. The words will tumble out. I need them to rhyme, not because I think poems should rhyme, but for me, the rhyme and the rhythm helps, and that helps it to kind of tumble out. I think probably if I was cool and 30 years younger, I'd be a rapper, because that's kind of how the poems come out. It's almost like a rap, but I'm not cool and I'm not 30 years younger. So really they are more like nursery rhymes and verses. But what it means is that I can articulate how I'm feeling very quickly. So that's poems. When it comes to writing a song, it's like I get wrapped up in a world. It's a very different process. I'm just looking at my piano now. So I'm kind of playing around on the piano. A tune might come first and then lyrics come after, but sometimes lyrics will just come from God and then I'll put a tune to it because I want to be able to share it with other people and I want other people to be able to sing it. That's when I'm writing my own songs. I also loved being creative when I had my choirs, and what I would do is, rather than a lot of standard choirs who will take one song and have arrangements within that song, what I would do is use lots of different songs to create one arrangement, so like a mashup. And I absolutely loved taking an old song, for instance, the New Seekers song, I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing, and mash it up with My Chemical Romance, where there's an amazing song called Sing, which is very much one of my anthems, and mash them up together. And it was always incredible how I could make the songs fit together. And I could. I mean, there were times when I'd say, no, that song really doesn't go with that song. But I think I could just hear how musically they would work together. And what it meant was everybody could sing it, because people would either know I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing, or I could teach them the other song and then you could put it together. So it meant that everybody could sing an original arrangement in a relatively short space of time. And I loved that idea. And I think probably those are the 3 types of creativity that are in my kind of wheelhouse. I'm definitely not a crafty, arty kind of person.
Yeah. I know that creativity in art, it's not necessarily held in the highest esteem when it comes to kind of academia and careers. And so I'm wondering whether you have managed to stay in that space, or whether there have been times in your life when you kind of ended up getting pulled out into something less artistic.
I think I just brought that space in with me, Catherine, to be honest. I just couldn't accept that space didn't exist somewhere. But so when I ran Raise as a business for quite a long time. I was employed as a church children's worker in Bradford. Basically, they asked me to work across the church, which had 4 congregations, the community and schools. They wanted me to work across all those things. And what I found as I started to put things in place was that the children were confused about who I was and what I was doing. So I put it under a kind of a banner of Raise. And through that, I did lots of different work in schools. And one of the things that I made sure that I did was allow the young people that I worked with space to do things like write raps and poems and have that creative space and expression. So even if they weren't being given it at school, I would take it in for them and say, this is your creative space. And I don't believe that nobody can be creative. So I would help them to kind of draw it out. And if they add words that they didn't know how to share, then I would help them to do that. So I never sat them down and said, we're writing a rap. I don't care if you don't want to, far from it. But just bring out different elements of expression for them. And sometimes they would want to draw and that kind of thing. And that was great because that was what they wanted to do. But I was a big believer in them sharing in the way that they wanted to. So giving them the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So where did your faith first emerge?
So one of the biggest things about my mum was she was a Christian and her faith was everything. And it was very interesting because I now realize as an adult that when she was well, her faith was beautiful and it was safe and it was strong and lovely. But when she was in a bad space mentally, her faith became quite manipulative and painful. But what happened when I was little certainly was we would do like devotional books. I don't know if you will remember that they're called Simon and Sarah books. I've not heard of, but do you know what? Have you ever heard of them?
No, I haven't.
So I might have just made them up. I don't think I have. I remember there were like stepping stones and you had to colour the stepping stones in every day when you'd done it. Anyway, and we did those from a really early age. So I know that I was about 4 when I said that I wanted Jesus in my heart and I meant it. And it was a positive space at that time. So I wasn't doing it for my mum. I wanted it for myself and had a very interesting religious background. And I've since found out that I'm called a Anglican. So my dad was a Quaker and my mum was Anglican Church of England. So we would go between Quakers and Church of England quite a long time. And for those of your listeners that know about Quakers, one of the things is that it's very silent. It's a very silent space. And even though I went to the children's part of Quakers, it was still a kind of a space of peace. And I remember there was always 10 minutes at the end where the children came in and you had to be quiet. And it felt like weeks of silence. And all you wanted to do was get to the bit where you shook hands and then you could go in and get sugar lumps off the tea tray. My faith is just fueled by bribery. No, so it was an interesting base for me to grow up in. I think this kind of idea that faith was very, very quiet and nobody said anything versus really kind of happy, clappy, and being in a Sunday school where actually children were quite mean to me. It's very hard growing up with a mum who's got serious mental health issues because you get bullied. Mm. So even in church, that was one of the things that I do kind of remember was just not being really understood. But my faith stayed strong through it all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what kind of Anglican church was it? Because they vary, don't they?
Oh, yeah. It was a lovely church. It was they had like a soup kitchen. My mum is very involved in the community side of it. When she was well and when she was at home, she was very much involved in that kind of community side of it. And it was a real musical church. And I remember they did musicals and I was in the choir and involved in quite a lot of the musical side of it. So there was a lot going on. and that was lovely to kind of be involved in. And it wasn't till much later on that I chose to go to a Baptist church when I was a teenager later on.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your earliest memories of your encounter with God?
Well, I wrote my first worship song when I was about eight or nine, I think. And I think that will have been, and I was just aware that God was my friend and that it's a hard one, actually. Probably it was more my teenage years where I really started to know God for myself. I think there were lots of different parties going on, and people were starting to explore lots of different avenues as teenagers. And I remember God saying very clearly to me that He didn't want me to be involved in that because I'd been kind of set apart for what He wanted for me. And I took that very seriously and was known for not getting involved. Having said that, we also had the most incredible Christian union. It was called TFG. So my school was called Twyford. So it was Twyford Fellowship Group. And there was just one guy, Jeff Lumley, and he just created this space for teenagers to be who they were. But he showed us just the love of God and how He wanted to be involved in every area of our lives, and He allowed us to lead. So when I first started TFG, we went on this weekend and the worship was all led by older teenagers, and there were lots of teachers there as well. But it was very much about how we could own our faith and our relationship, and that it wasn't about it being done to us. It was about us being involved. And I mean, I'm actually going to a party on Saturday, and lots of people from TFG will be there. And we're a family, absolutely a family. And it wasn't culty kind of thing. There wasn't anything bad about it. It was just an incredible space that this guy created for us. And we almost kind of, we didn't run the school. It was a Church of England school, but we were very much known for when people had problems, they would come to someone from TFG and be prayed for. And there were a lot of people that dipped in and out depending on what was going on in their home lives. It was a real ministry we were allowed to have, and not just allowed, but empowered and enabled to have a ministry at school whilst being school kids. Yeah, so I think that was where it really landed.
Yeah. It really sounds like your growing up has gifted you with quite a lot of spaces that have allowed you to be you, so that combination of the Anglican space and the Quaker space would have had within it some diversity, and this beautiful sort of school space of really embracing and celebrating what it was that all of the kids had to bring for one another is quite incredible. So what was it that drew you to the Baptist church? What was it that you were seeking, or what was that giving you?
Boys. There's no other way of saying it. It was because of TFG and because of school. What we found was that different people from TFG went to different churches, and there was a Baptist church. And it wasn't me, I don't think, she says, hopefully. It was a friend that wanted to go. And again, it's very interesting. It was the boy that I was speaking to this morning. My friend wanted to go to the church that this boy was at. And that was why we started. But actually, when we got there, again, another space where young people can minister, probably a little bit more needing to kind of not toe the line, but it was more structured, and we were expected to kind of follow that structure a little bit more. But it was a wonderful space for young people, and it was busy, and again, a lot of music. So I was involved in the worship, but also I think by that point I was really writing quite a lot of songs myself, and the worship team allowed me to kind of experiment with sharing those, and I was known for writing the songs and things like that. So although it was a boy that theoretically took us there initially, I really found a space for myself, and it was quite a difficult conversation saying to my mum, I want to go to a Baptist church and I want to be baptized, but it was the right thing to do for me, and it was an important time of me saying I need to take ownership of my own faith now. Yeah.
So if we sort of fast forward a bit, you've talked a little bit about your Raise ministry. And so if I'd met you 8 years ago, what would you have been up to?
8 years ago, I had story sessions with songs that I written myself. So I created a story session called Raise and Shine Storytime. And that was created through when I had my son, my mum died in the same year. And so I had probably, thinking back to it now, some kind of postnatal depression, but I really found it difficult. And so I wrote songs to help me to do the things that I needed to do as a mum. So I wrote a bath song and a potty song, and then what I did was I used those songs to shape this kind of story time. I had probably 3 or 4 choirs. I had a choir in a school. I had a community choir in a place called Pudsey. I had a youth choir in that same place. And then I had an intergenerational choir in another place. I was still going into schools and working with young people, doing sessions around self-esteem and confidence, helping them to help each other. So peer mentoring.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's interesting, that thread that's come through of you having the space to kind of express yourself and to minister, and then passing that on to the young people that you worked with, which is lovely. That's the legacy of Jeff Lumley et al. Is quite brilliant, isn't it?
Mm.
When you were describing all of the things that you were doing, like 4 choirs, I think you said that you've got 5 different sets of story times every week. You were doing songwriting, you were doing youth work, you were doing schools work, you were working with young carers. It's just, so just an absolute massive stuff. And my sense was, had we met then, you would have given me the impression of being the kind of person who had more energy than should strictly be allowed for one human being.
Maybe. Or I'd just been very tired.
But certainly really, really busy. And then I know that has really changed since COVID. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So in 2020, I got COVID fairly early on, and it was pretty mild. I had a cough for about between 8 and 10 weeks, something like that, which wasn't fun. But apart from that, I really didn't have it that badly. And as with the rest of the world, everything was taken online. So throughout that time that I had COVID, I did story sessions online still and tried to do some Facebook Lives with the choir. And someone said, "Oh, can we do a Zoom choir?" So I did a Zoom choir for an hour, and I basically couldn't get up the next day. And it took me 2 weeks to fully recover and feel like I had at least some energy to do something. So that day, I think my son and I went out for a walk, which we would do very normally, didn't think anything of it. And again, the next day, I couldn't get up, and it took me 2 weeks to recover. And I then started having very strange symptoms that were not what I was used to, bizarre feelings in the bottom of my feet and strange pains that I'd never had before. And I can't remember quite how it happened, but the words long haul COVID came into my arena, probably through Facebook or something. And I went onto a Facebook forum for this long haul COVID and discovered that there were people like me that were having the same weird feelings that I was. And you could say things like, I'm having a weird pain here, anybody else? And suddenly 20 people would say, yeah, me too. And I realized that, there was something really wrong, something had really changed. And basically over the space of the last 6 years, having had COVID twice more and had a stay in hospital, I'm now disabled. So life has completely changed, for me. And even when you were saying all the things that I used to do, I could feel the lump, the lump in my throat, because life has completely changed.
Yeah. Huge amount of loss in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not any sense of when does this end? It's not like there is a kind of an end in sight at the beginning of that journey, is there, of what this might be like? So you were really walking into the unknown.
Yeah, but one of the things that the GPs are still saying is, you're the experts on this and we're learning from you, which is really hard because you want someone to be able to say, don't worry, we've got this and this is what we can do. It's just not working like that.
Yeah. So how has that shifted your sense of who you are and who God is?
Lots of soul searching, lots of grieving, and lots of doubt, coming before God and saying, what does this look like then? And are you still going to use me? There's an amazing song called Scars by Brandon Heath. And there's a line in it and it says, if I'm not going to lose it, promise me you'll use it. And that absolutely became my mantra. Just saying to God, if I'm still here and I'm still got all the things that you want me to have, then promise me that you'll keep using it. And there's another line in a DC Talk song. The song's called Consume Me. And the line is, doesn't matter what I lose, I'm yours. And that became a mantra years and years ago and has been through, am I going to be able to keep my son when I was pregnant, and just having the normal fears of, or can't feel him kick in today kind of thing, all the way through to, a couple of weeks ago where I lost all my social media. Doesn't matter what I lose, I'm yours. That's it. And just having to say that over and over again and keep coming to the place of, no, I do still mean it. I do still mean it. But honestly, really, like, do I have to keep losing? Do I have to keep losing stuff? And it has felt like that. That's the thing. I still have things that I'm doing, but I've definitely lost a lot. I have. It doesn't feel like a replacement because it was such a big life. And it doesn't feel like a big life anymore.
No. I wonder if there are ways of seeing the world or sort of Christian mantras, things that people tend to say that you have needed to let go of, or that it's been necessary to let go of, other things that you would have said to people before that you wouldn't say now.
Yeah, I mean, I know that wonderful people have kind of said, we're praying for your full healing and, miraculous healing, and just realizing that I have no idea what healing would look like now. I don't physically know what it would look like to wake up and not have anything feeling different or strange. There's so many different things that have changed in my body that it would almost be alien to not feel all that anymore. And also the whole kind of invisible illness and not judging people. I think God's really spoken to me about not understanding that everybody has different needs, and it doesn't matter if you can see them or not, if that's their need. So I think those kind of things that I was brought up to believe, the kind of, total healing. And I mean, words were so important for my mum, and she would often say, we're not going to say certain things because it will like almost like make them happen. and just realizing that it doesn't work like that. And confessing your words are very important. And you can use a word to really reframe and change things, but you can't make bad things happen by saying negative stuff. I don't believe that anymore. Things happen.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And equally, you can't make the good things happen just by saying stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have been the least helpful things people have said to you?
I think things like, we're praying for a miracle for you, because I just don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I found it really hard to understand, how that would look, and so couldn't kind of claim it for myself.
There's also that sort of double thing of, if somebody says, we're praying for a miracle for you, and that sense of, well, maybe I should claim that miracle. That is asking you to step into a world that does not exist, whilst actually you need to live in the one that does. That can be really, really unhelpful, because how do you get to grips with walking with Jesus in the world that you are being called to walk in, if people are constantly telling you to pretend that you're not?
Yeah. I think the other thing is, people, again, really lovely, well-meaning people just saying, "Oh, you're looking really well today," and just thinking, but I still don't feel it. It's because they want that for you, and they just see that snapshot of you, and so then you kind of feel guilty. There's a lot of shoulds and woulds and things with chronic illness and other people. You're kind of like, well, I should feel like this, or I should try and do this, or maybe I could push myself a bit further, that kind of thing. But people shouldn't stop saying things like that, because you don't want people to get scared to not talk to anybody at all. So that's more my stuff rather than theirs, really. Yeah. But there's definitely reframing that could happen, things that you could say to people that would just be a bit more open-ended, I guess.
Yes. Do you have any examples?
I knew you were going to say that. just lovely to see you. Glad you're here. Those kind of things. Rather than putting any kind of observation or judgment, however well-meaning, just not needing to do that at all. Just celebrating the person.
Yes. How has your understanding of what it means to be a valuable human being shifted in these years?
Yeah. Again, going back to that line about, if I'm not going to lose it, promise me you'll use it. I mean, I know that my value comes from doing stuff. That's where I place my own value. So if I'm doing stuff, if I'm earning it, if I'm being useful, helpful, whatever, then that's where my value comes from, of myself. And that just isn't God's value of me at all. God's value of me is just me being. That's it. And that's really hard, because on the days where I am literally doing well just to be, I don't feel of value. And I think the most difficult thing for me as a Christian, having this chronic illness, is it's difficult to explain, but obviously spirituality and connection with God is a mental, cognitive thing. So you hear words from God, or you read words from God, or you hear encouragement. When your cognitive and mental ability is all messed up, you don't. And so it's hard to feel that value, because it's like white noise in your head anyway. And those are quite painful times, because you can't access anything at all. It's just like, well, my husband just says, I'm not here. That's how it is. And I have a poem called The Incredible Disappearing Woman, and it's just about how quickly I can disappear. It's just quite a good one for explaining how it feels, because people often, they can't access how that feels to suddenly kind of disappear. The Incredible Disappearing Woman. Now you see her, now you don't. Traveling the world between the living and the dead, blending into her surroundings as the pain envelops. Shield up, camouflage on. She is gone.
Thank you.
And those are hard times to access anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an experience which is quite often shared by people with mental illness too. You know, if you've got depression, you're just out of energy, then obviously your energy for the spiritual stuff sort of disappears too.
Mm.
Has your ability to embrace God's view of you as valuable just for being, is that something which you are noticing slowly growing?
I think that's where the raised word really works hard, because I can access a word. And what God showed me recently, it was funny, I was watching, I don't know if you've seen it, the other Bennett sister, she's on iPlayer. And it was just a very simple thing. She was at the optician, but she had those weird glasses on, and then they put the lens in and say, is it better now or now? And what God showed me was that that's what the raised word does for me. It's like I see the whole week through a different lens. So everything is like reframed. And so I think that value that he's placing on me, that comes through the joy, I think, of seeing that word working in the week. So the word for this week is invite. And I did that because it was my son's birthday. But just thinking about the word invitation and looking at it with the Facebook community and hearing how people, we always say what's difficult or challenging about the word one day, and then we say what's positive or good about the word the next day. And hearing how the word invitation can be such a double-edged sword, and how that's opened things up for people. And realizing over and over again that my value now is much more in the ministry sense. And it's just going to happen. It's just who I am. I don't really even have to do anything, although I am doing things, but it doesn't feel like it. People used to say, oh, isn't the Facebook community, isn't that really hard work? It just isn't. It just doesn't feel like work at all. And even a few weeks ago, well, I mean, I think that was when, again, I really just had to come right into the heart of God, because all my social media was removed. I was removed out of that community group, my own community group that I'd grown from 6 years ago. And I had an admin doing it, but I was removed. All of the words were removed. And I was like, wow, like, now what? I don't exist in my own group. And God took me to that place again of, well, then where's my value now? Because even the thing that I found easy, I don't have. But what happened then was I found comments about the podcast that I'd never read before, where people were saying how much it had blessed them and changed them. And somebody else put some money into a buy me a coffee thing that I have. But it was someone that I didn't know. I've always used to working with people that I either know or get to know. And I didn't know this person. And it was like God was saying, I am working through you. You just keep being. And when I said to him, right, well, is it time to jack it in then? Are you telling me that I need to stop the podcast, stop the Facebook community? Like, really, who will I be if that all finishes? And once I'd got to the part of, doesn't matter what I lose, I'm yours. If I'm not going to lose it, promise me you'll use it. Once we'd bottomed that all out and got to the, I'm still using you regardless, then it was like, right, then we go again. Then we keep doing what we're doing, because I know that it's God first, then me. And because he's taken me out of it, so it's got to be God's still there. So we go again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But my word, Catherine. Yeah. Humble doesn't even cover it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It sounds, I mean, I have so many different thoughts firing off. on a really practical level, one of which is just the wisdom and beauty of having one word. Because if your capacity is small, there's so much within Christian spirituality which is about working quite hard. You know, the whole thing about we'll get into the word, i.e., read the Bible a lot. Well, that's quite hard work. We'll do some praying, and that can be quite hard work. But actually, just walking with one word, most of the time, there'll be at least some time in the day where just holding one word is doable.
Mm.
And I think that's really beautiful. I've also heard, it sounds to me as if your ability to appreciate people for just being and not needing them to do is growing, has grown. Just that sense of being and our being a ministry to people. I remember meeting somebody years ago who was employed by her church. She was an amazing, lovely person. And they actually said to her, we're not going to give you a whole list of things to do because actually we think that you are valuable and you're simply being part of this community is what we're after. So she kind of she didn't really have much of a job description. Her job description was to be who she was. We'll pretend she's Maria. But so her job description was to be Maria in that place with those people. And in the end, the most precious part of our lives is our relationships with one another. You know, our being connecting with somebody else's being. If you think about being in love, it's really it's amazing, but it's quite an intangible thing, isn't it? When simply sitting next to somebody and having the honour of holding their hand becomes this utterly joyous, precious, irreplaceable thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was very much my thing with my husband. Was when I met him at a Salvation Army conference. I was working for the Toy Box charity and he was a delegate. And my job was to invite people to do a gap year and go to Guatemala. And he was one of the only people that said, no, I'm not interested. And I was fascinated. I was like, wow, you're honest. You're not just taking the flyer and saying, yeah, and then putting it in the bin around the corner. You're actually honest about it. And we connected. We talked for quite a long time. And one of the things that I always remember is we really looked into each other's eyes as we were talking to each other. And I knew there was something different about him. And then obviously he went because he was just a delegate, you know. And I just had to see him the next day. And I had no idea whether I'd ever see him again. And there was something happening. And he said, well, he might come back the next day. And I remember sitting on this rock by the water, just saying to God, I have to see him. I absolutely have to see him again. Please let me see him again. And God just saying, you can't make a rock. I was like, what? And he said, you can't make a rock. It just is. It just is. You will be together. And we've really, really taken that on board throughout our whole marriage, that our job is just to be together, not have to do things to impress each other, but just to be. And actually he has very, very high functioning chronic fatigue syndrome, but when we were first married it was at its worst. So he was like I am now. So being together was incredibly important and still is. So I'm my only problem, that I'm the one that has to be doing everything. Everybody else can just be, and that's wonderful and valuable. But if I'm not doing something, then what's the point?
So the whole universe has one rule for everybody except Carol Barwick.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yet all around you, God has placed evidence for you that God is simply in love with us for simply being.
Yeah.
There's that verse that hit me a little while ago now, and I just thought, oh my goodness. You know, there's the verse which says that we were chosen in him before the foundation of the world. So if you ever want any evidence that God doesn't need us to do anything before we are loved and chosen. Well, we didn't even need to exist yet.
Mm.
Just the expectation of our existence filled God's heart with love.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the way in which all of our love is a pale reflection of the divine love for us, which means that love that you felt for your now husband, that kind of gave you that urgency of wanting to simply be with him before he'd done anything except refuse your toy box leaflet, is a pale reflection of the divine love that simply wants to be and hold your hand.
Yeah.
I think that's quite incredible, really.
Yeah, that is love vast as an ocean, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a friend of mine who I will shamelessly quote. She tells a story of going on a retreat, one of the early retreats that she went on, and saying to God that she felt that this time that she was setting aside just to be somewhere, not doing very much, just being on retreat. She said to God, well, it's a bit indulgent, isn't it? And God said to her, so indulge me.
Mm.
So indulge me. That's just stuck with me, that sense that in our simply being, we are indulging God in our presence.
Yeah. It's that just the permission, isn't it? He's like, yeah, I'm giving you permission to just be.
Yeah. Yeah. And many of those little interactions that we have with other people where we are simply being and allowing other people space to simply be is the treasure in the field. It is the great gift, the pearl of great price that we can offer one another, that God offers us. God's being offers something precious to us, which absolutely doesn't erase the pain and the struggle and the grief of the stuff that you've lost, but there is something very precious.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's about finding and holding on to those precious treasures.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much, Carol, for this conversation. So tell us a bit about where people can find you. Where can they find your Raise podcast?
So I am back on Instagram. And one of the things that actually losing social media did was it made me just realize that I could actually take the opportunity to kind of rebrand. So I am under _Raise_podcast, both on Facebook and on Instagram. And the podcast itself is across all platforms that you listen. And I have this Facebook community group that people are welcome to join, and that is called Raise Raising Confidence, Inspiring Creativity. Could we pop a few bits in the show notes? Is that?
Absolutely. You forward me whatever you want in the show notes and we will stick them in. So all of the details about how to connect with you, Carol, are going to be in our show notes. And then we are very excited for people to listen to part 2 of our conversation, where we will be talking about doubt.
Yes, I'm very excited about that. Yes.
I slightly perversely think is a really exciting word. And thank you so much for sharing your story so honestly and with such depth today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you. And yeah, I'm excited to hear how it inspires and raises the listeners' confidence as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loved Called Gifted podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email lovedcalledgifted@gmail.com. You can find a transcript of this podcast at lovedcalledgifted.com. And that's also the place to go if you're interested in the Loved Called Gifted course, or if you'd like to find out about spiritual direction or coaching. Thank you for listening.